series of Unity tutorials that I am producing for my class, but also for anyone on YouTube who wants to learn how to program uh, the basics of Unity. So if you follow this series of tutorials through, and I've linked all the worksheets in the link below, it's a Google Docs file, they're all numbered, and the video number will match the number of the worksheet. If you all follow them all through, eventually you will make a first-person shooter game. And the way I plan on doing this is to teach you a little bit about the basics of Unity, so like the different game objects and for example, like what the main camera is, what this transform is. I'll come on to that in a minute. And then once I've done that, I want to teach you a little bit about programming. So also if you're new to programming, this is for you. And it's obviously in C# because that's the language that Unity is programmed in. And I'll start off with the basics of teaching you variables and data types, and then control flow, so how to control your game if this happens or that happens. And also we'll look into things like creating different functions to break your scripts up a little bit, which can help to make your code more readable and easier to understand. So if you're a beginner in Unity and programming, then this is for you. So let's get on with it. So the first thing you need to do is make sure that you've got the right version of Unity that I have. I'm going to make sure that that is pinned on the top. So view, float on top. So yeah, go to the Unity homepage, download the free personal edition. Make sure that you've installed this version of Unity, 22.3.10F1. You need this version because it will match my one, and then you'll have the same things. Obviously, if you're watching this way in the future, then you're probably going to want to get the much newer version, and it might be different to what I'm doing here, but I'm sure that I will probably release an updated video or something. So get this version, install that. You also need to make sure that you've got a license. If you're doing this in my classroom, the licenses and the installs are all set up. You don't need to install anything. If you're trying to set up your own licenses and install it on the machines in the college, you should not do that because everything is set up for you. You just need to open up Unity icon on the desktop with that Unity number. So, but if you are doing it at home, you need a personal license. So you need to go to licenses and then create an account and create a license. Okay. So once you've set that all up, you go to projects, and you create new project. You're going to create a new 3D project, and you're going to call that Hello World, probably, or Hello World FPS game, like this, because that's what it will become, FPS game, first-person shooter game. But don't have any illusion, we're not going to be making Call of Duty or anything super advanced. It's just going to be basically, eventually, a simple character control that you can move with the keys and press fire and it hits enemies. And then from that, you can go ahead and create anything you like. So we'd create that project. The project will create. I've got one open already. And then there we are. We're all set up. We're in Unity. This may take you a minute or two to get everything working. But I've got mine set up because I'm doing a video and I don't want to have to wait around. So let's have a look around here. So I've been doing something else in this before. So let's have a look around here. When we opened up Unity, we've got a hierarchy. In hierarchy, we've got a main camera and a directional light. In the bottom here, we have a project window. This is where you drag any external files, 3D objects, textures, or whatever. You drag them into this space here, and then you'll be able to drag them into the hierarchy here. The hierarchy is what your game will appear, all the things that will be in your game. And when you add things into your game, they appear in the scene window, and the scene window is your design window. It's where you can move things around, adjust things, and be creative. The other tab here next to it is the game window. This is what will appear when you press this play button at the top. So if I press that now, basically nothing will happen. You'll just see nothing because we haven't put anything in the game. But what it's doing is it's running the game, running any scripts, and waiting for user input or something to happen. But this is a completely empty world. So I press play again and it stops it. And that's what the game window is. The game window is the view into our world. The view into our world comes from our camera. And our camera has, if we look in this inspector tab over here, has certain components. The first one is a transform. Second one is camera, third one is an audio listener. So I won't talk too much about these two, other than you need to have a camera in your game, at least one, because you need to have a view into your world, else you can't see the world. And the camera is responsible for showing the world, and as you move your character around, the camera moves around with you and it changes your point of view or your perspective. There are many different settings that you can play around with in here. We could just tweak a few of them. One thing you need to get used to is the keys. Now, if you're on a Windows machine, if you press left Alt and you click in the scene window, so if I press right key, left Alt, you get this eye. I'm on a Mac and I'm pressing Option. The eye will let you sort of circle around. Not sort of, it does let you circle around. Other functions are in this tool thing here. If you click on the hand, it lets you move your point at your center point. If you click on the arrows, it makes you move the thing along the axes, so X, Y, and Z. Then you've got rotate, you've got scale, and these two tools here, which I don't ever really use. But this one here, the very bottom one, combines everything. So you can have all the tools in one go when you click on it. You've got the scale, you've got the movement along the X and the Y axis, and you've got rotating. So let's use this move tool. And what I want you to do is, if you look over here at the main camera in the inspect window, look at the transform and look at the position. As I move on the X-axis like that, the X-axis coordinate changes. I'm going to reset that to 0. So you can either drag along the axes to move things, or you can actually set the numbers. I'm going to reset that 0, 0, 0. If I drag on the green one, the Y one will change, and if I drag on the blue one, the Z one will change. If I switch to rotate, I drag on the blue rotate. Now I'm rotating around that blue Z axis, and you can see the value in the rotate Z value changing. So that's like moving from like side to side like that, almost as if you were moving your head like that. If you went along the X, the red one, that's like looking up and down, up and down. And these are important things to bear in mind when you want your character to do those kind of movements. If you want them to look left, or if you want them to look right, the way that you would do this is by moving along these rotate axes. And this one, the green one, is rotating around the Y axis. So that's like kind of turning around like that. So you can imagine if in our world, if you have an axis, like you are in a 3D world, and you can move forward, you can move back, up and down, and you can rotate around your Z, and you can look up or rotate around the X, up and down. So that's really important to understand these transforms. They're the basic thing that every game object has in your world, because every game object needs to know where it is, its position, its rotation, and its scale. The scale won't really matter at the moment because we don't actually have anything we can scale up, but it just changes the size. So I press Option again, or you press left Alt, and I'm going to rotate around and give myself a different perspective. You can also see that the camera has like a sort of a field of view, and if you looked at the camera component here, you can change that projection. Something called orthographic would be it just look flat, straight on. So there's not really any depth perception. Whereas if we change it to perspective, then there is depth. So things are going to be, not everything's going to be the same distance away from the camera, but everything's going to be gradually further away. They get smaller. So there's things you can play around with depending on what you want your game to be. Obviously, in a 2D platform game, the camera would look with an orthographic way because there is no depth. It's just 2D. Everything that's kind of on the same level. All right. You can change the field of view. See how the field of view changes, those white lines, if I move that thing there. So have a look through those, but it's not, you don't need to worry about that too much. Okay, so that's a little explanation of the different windows in Unity and the transform and the main camera. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to add a terrain map. So if I right click in the hierarchy and I go down to UI and I go to, where is it? 3D object, sorry, and I go to terrain. What will happen now is Unity will create a checkerboard. And this checkerboard is going to be your terrain map. And on this, you can paint any world you want. You can paint mountains and valleys and oceans. It's a huge area. So if I click in here, I click on there. Now, if I use the mouse wheel, or if you have a trackpad 2 fingers like that, or the mouse wheel, you can zoom in on the center of whatever you're focused on, or you can zoom out. I want to center on the terrain, so I want to center on the camera, so I can double click on the camera. And now I'm right in where the camera is. The camera cannot see the terrain, so I need to move the camera along a bit and up a bit. And now it's got a view onto it. It's right at the edge of the terrain, so let's move it in a little bit. And this is important when you start painting because you want your camera to be in the middle of it, so when you run your game you can see your world. So now we're going to start painting. So I'm going to zoom right out and I'm going to change my perspective like this. And over in the inspector, I'm going to click on the second tool along, which if I hover over it, it will give me a tooltip. It says paint terrain. Then there's paint. The first option in the drop-down list is paint texture. I don't want a texture yet, but I want to raise and lower terrain. At the moment, we've got this brush, and the brush is this size. So you can change the slider here to make it a little bit bigger, and you can change it from a hard to a soft brush. So now, if I click in there, you can see that I can make a nice smooth mountain like that. So why don't you pause the video and have wait a second actually, because I just want to show you how you can also lower terrain, and then have a little play around and create any world you want and have fun. That's the main part of this. So Unity is fun, programming is fun, creating things is fun. If I want to set the height, say I want to, I want the world to be of a certain height, I can set that to say 20. So I choose the next drop down option below, set height at 20. I go in here and I paint, and then you can see here I'm kind of creating a flat terrain on top of a mountain and then another mountain on top. If I want to delete everything I've done, I can just press Shift, and I think it's Shift. Should be on a Windows machine. I'm going to get the hand and I'm going to move my center of point of view. And then I'm going to come back to here. I'm going to click on terrain again. I'm going to click on the brush. So at the moment it's still painting. Right, yeah, we're going to switch back to raise and lower terrain. I think if I press Shift, now you can see it's now deleting what I've done. So it's completely removing any of the terrain that I've raised or lowered. Whereas when I'm in set height, it will just paint everything to a certain height. So I can have a mountain with a plain. So you can have like kind of a hill, sort of, a slightly higher land, right? So if you want, pause the video and have fun painting. I'm just going to do a little bit myself. Paint. I'm going to have a harsher brush. and have a massive mountain here. I'm going to make the brush a little bit smaller, and I think we need it to be slightly bigger. And I want to build like a nice peak of mountains here. One thing you could do is you could like find a picture of your favorite place, like you like going to outdoors, or a mountain range, or just Google something like the Himalayas, or like Everest, and maybe you can kind of try and recreate how that mountain range looked. So or that plain, or even a city, um, and have some fun. So have a pause, play around with that, raise and lower terrain, uh, set the height, and you can also smooth terrain as well. So if you think the peaks are too sharp, then you can just click on them and it will smooth it out a bit, so you have more of a hilly texture. So play around with these different settings and see what each one does.